The eternal vigilance hung in Earth's orbit, its crystalline hull refracting sunlight in patterns no human eye could fully perceive. Inside Observation Deck 7, senior xenobiologist Zalnar pressed all four of his upper appendages against the viewport, studying the blue-green planet below with growing fascination. "Counselor, you must see these readings." Zalnar's voice resonated through his crystalline form, creating harmonic patterns that communicated both words and emotional context. The atmospheric composition alone should make complex life impossible. High Counselor Vrillex glided across the chamber, her photosynthetic skin darkening in annoyance. "I did not travel 16 light-years to stare at anomalous readings, Zalnar. The Integration Committee requires your assessment of this species' biological viability." "That's precisely my point." Zalnar's crystals flushed amber with excitement. "Their biology makes no sense. They breathe oxygen, a corrosive gas, and their cellular structures contain metal components that should trigger immediate oxidative breakdown. Yet they clearly exist," Vrillex noted dryly. "The committee has already scheduled first contact for tomorrow. I need concrete data, not theoretical impossibilities." The observation deck's doors hummed open as Lieutenant Zix entered, his insectoid form clicking in the formal salute of the Federation Survey Corps. "The human delegation has arrived ahead of schedule, Counselor." "Impossible." Vrillex's skin paled to nearly transparent. "Our arrival message estimated contact in 26 standard hours." The humans apologize for the inconvenience. Zix's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. They said they were too excited to wait. The first contact chamber had been meticulously designed to accommodate all 17 Federation species. The atmospheric composition was carefully regulated, temperature zones established, and gravity plating calibrated to multiple standards. Yet nothing had prepared the Federation delegation for simply watching humans move. "Are they using artificial musculature enhancements?" Zalnar whispered to Medical Officer Trillax as the human delegation entered. 5 bipeds, varying in height and pigmentation, walked confidently across the chamber despite the carefully calibrated 1.2 G gravity setting. "Preliminary scans detect no technology," Trillax replied, her bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with concern. "Their muscle density is remarkable, evolved rather than engineered." The human in front, a female designated Ambassador Chen, approached the ceremonial greeting stone, a polished cube of Ardelian granite weighing approximately 22 kilograms. It was a standard diplomatic prop used across the galaxy. Most species required mechanical assistance to lift it, demonstrating the need for technological cooperation among different biological forms. Ambassador Chen picked it up with one hand. Zalnar's crystalline body vibrated in shock as she casually examined the stone, then passed it to another human who seemed equally unburdened by its weight. His measurement instruments must be malfunctioning. "We bring greetings from Earth." Ambassador Chen smiled, revealing calcium-based cutting implements embedded in her jaw. "And we're thrilled to finally meet our galactic neighbors." Counselor Vrillex had just begun the formal response when a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. Federation security personnel immediately activated defensive protocols as the human-designated cultural attaché Okafor looked up in surprise. "Sorry," he said, wiggling the terminal phalanges of his upper manipulators. "Just cracking my knuckles." "Bad habit." Medical Officer Trillax collapsed in a dead faint. Later, reviewing the biological scan data in his private laboratory, Zalnar struggled to make sense of what he'd witnessed. Humans possessed endoskeletons that could self-repair after microfractures. Their muscles operated at efficiencies that violated standard metabolic constraints. Even their cellular respiration utilized corrosive oxygen in a process that should, by all known biological principles, be immediately fatal. "What's wrong with these creatures?" he muttered, comparing human baseline measurements against the Federation's biological database. "Nothing about them makes sense." On his display screen, the human biological profile glowed with 17 highlighted anomalies. each one technically impossible according to universal constants of evolution. Zalnar's crystalline form vibrated with what his species considered laughter. His punishment assignment had just become the most fascinating research opportunity in the galaxy. "Is this some form of ritualistic self-harm?" Security Officer Vril asked, her carapace flexing with concern as she watched the humans gathered at the outdoor venue, humans called a food festival. Zalnar adjusted his atmospheric filters as pungent molecules assaulted his chemical receptors. After 2 standard weeks on Earth, Tokyo had proven the ideal location to study human consumption patterns, though nothing had prepared him for the spectacle before them. "They call it a spicy food challenge," he explained, recording measurements with his portable scanner. "Those red pods contain capsaicin, a neurotoxic compound that triggers pain receptors." On stage, 5 humans competed to consume something called ghost pepper wings, while spectators cheered. Tears streamed down their faces, their dermal layers flushed crimson, and several appeared to be in respiratory distress. And they're doing this voluntarily. Vril's antennae twitched in disbelief. "For entertainment," Zalnar confirmed. "The winner receives a decorative garment and social status recognition." Vril's mandibles clicked rapidly, her species equivalent of a horrified gasp. "I'm contacting medical response units. This is clearly unnecessary," Zalnar interrupted as the contest concluded. "Observe. Despite apparent distress, their vital signs are already normalizing." The winner, drenched in perspiration, hoisted a trophy while consuming additional toxin-laden nutrients. The crowd roared approval. Fascinatingly adaptive digestive systems, Zalnar's crystalline body shimmered with excitement. This requires further investigation. The Federation's first diplomatic banquet with humanity was proceeding smoothly until the servitor drone malfunctioned, cross-contaminating the precisely calibrated meals designed for each species' digestive requirements. "Containment Protocol Alpha," Chief Medical Officer Zivtor announced, her breathing sacs inflating with alarm. "Potential toxic exposure." 3 Federation delegates were immediately rushed to medical pods as the humans watched in bewilderment. "What's happening?" Ambassador Chen asked, still holding her fork of what should have been Ardelian cuisine, fatal to human physiology, according to all Federation medical models. "Don't consume that," Zalnar warned, rushing toward her. "Your plate contains Phosian fungal proteins that will." Chen chewed thoughtfully. "It's a bit like truffles with hints of blue cheese," she remarked to her colleagues. "Interesting texture." The banquet hall fell silent as Federation representatives stared in horror. "You appear unaffected by molecular structures that would dissolve Mrathi digestive organs," Zalnar observed, scanning her vital signs. "How is this possible?" "Strong stomach, I guess," Chen shrugged. "Say, is anyone going to finish that purple stuff? It looks fascinating." In his laboratory beneath the Tokyo Research Station, Zalnar reviewed microscopic footage of human digestive samples with growing amazement. "Their entire gastrointestinal system is a symbiotic marvel," he explained to the assembled Federation science team. "Humans host approximately 39 trillion microbial organisms that pre-process compounds that would otherwise be toxic." "You're suggesting they're not individual organisms, but colonies?" asked junior xenobiologist Prill, her tendrils rippling with academic excitement. "More like walking ecosystems," Zalnar confirmed. "Their microbial diversity allows them to adapt to almost any food source given sufficient time. They can literally evolve new digestive capabilities within a single lifetime." "That violates the unified consumption theory," Prill objected. "Specialized digestive efficiency is the hallmark of advanced evolution." Zalnar's crystalline form pulsed with what his colleagues recognized as wry amusement. "That's what makes humans so remarkable. They've evolved to be deliberately inefficient omnivores rather than specialized consumers." Their discussion was interrupted as a human research assistant entered, carrying a container that emitted pungent molecular signals. "Sorry to interrupt," she said cheerfully, "but I brought yogurt for everyone. It's full of beneficial bacteria." Prill's translation implant must have malfunctioned. You intentionally consume bacterial cultures. Oh yes, the human replied, spooning white semi-solid substance into her oral cavity. This one has active cultures of Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. They're delicious and good for digestion. 3 Federation scientists immediately exited the room, their physiological distress responses visibly activated. Zelnar, however, leaned forward with fascination. You cultivate microscopic organisms to consume them while still living. Absolutely. The human offered him the container. Would you like to try some? His response was lost in the sound of junior xenobiologist Prill collapsing onto the laboratory floor. General Krazik of the Federation Military Observation Corps stood rigid with shock, his exoskeleton plates clicking nervously as he watched the spectacle before him. 30,000 humans crowded Boston streets, preparing for something called a marathon. They're going to run 4,2,195 kilometers voluntarily, he asked the human liaison, Major Diana Rodriguez. Many trained for months just to participate, Rodriguez explained proudly. The elite runners will finish in just over 2 hours. Impossible. Krazik's secondary eyes blinked rapidly in disbelief. No sentient species can maintain aerobic exertion for. The starting gun fired, and thousands of humans surged forward. Krazik's data assistant, Lieutenant Frex, frantically recorded biometric readings. General, their core temperatures are rising to levels that would trigger emergency hibernation in Rothi physiology. Are they secreting water through their dermal layers? Krazik asked, focusing his compound eyes on the lead runners. As a cooling mechanism. Affirmative. Vrex confirmed. Their bodies are sacrificing precious hydration to maintain thermal regulation. Fascinating inefficiency, Krazik murmured, mandibles twitching with reluctant admiration. But surely unsustainable. Hours later, he watched in stunned silence as thousands of sweat-drenched humans crossed the finish line, many immediately consuming celebratory fermented grain beverages despite severe dehydration. I must submit an emergency assessment to High Command, he told Major Rodriguez. Your species' locomotion capabilities exceed all current tactical models. Zelnar had never expected to find himself stranded in Death Valley, Earth's most notorious temperature extreme. The research shuttle's propulsion system had failed 70 kilometers from the nearest outpost, and outside temperatures reached 47 degrees Celsius, beyond survival parameters for his crystalline biology. Environmental survival probability, 12.4%. Droned the shuttle's eye. Recommend emergency hibernation protocols for all non-human personnel. Dr. Maria Chen, the expedition's human guide, checked her water supply and squinted at the horizon. The Furnace Creek station is southeast. I can reach it in about 7 hours. Impossible, protested junior xenobiologist Prill. Even with thermal protection garments, no species can traverse such distance in these conditions. Chen smiled. Watch me. Before Zelnar could protest, she had donned minimal sun protection, filled a water container, and departed. She's committing suicide, Prill whispered, tendrils drooping in resignation. Zelnar adjusted his protective field. I'm not convinced. Their endurance capabilities defy conventional metabolic models. 15 hours later, as emergency hibernation protocols initiated throughout the shuttle, a ground transport appeared on the horizon. Chen emerged, sunburned but functional, carrying spare coolant cells and water. Sorry for the delay, she said, seemingly unaware she'd accomplished something physiologically miraculous. Had to convince them it was an actual emergency. Anyone hungry? Federation Combat Analyst Unit 7 reviewed thermal footage from recent joint training exercises with mounting concern. The holographic display showed human Special Forces operatives continuing complex tactical maneuvers despite core temperature fluctuations that should have rendered them unconscious. Replay sequence Gamma 9, ordered Chief Analyst Zorvex. The footage showed a human soldier continuing to function effectively after 36 hours without sleep or adequate hydration. Conventional endurance models must be recalibrated, noted his assistant. Humans don't simply resist fatigue. They adapt to it. That contradicts fundamental biological principles. Zorvex objected. Biological systems degrade under stress. They don't improve. Yet that's precisely what human physiology demonstrates. Zalnar stated, entering the analysis chamber. His crystalline form now contains specialized environmental adaptations after 3 months studying Earth's varied biomes. He activated a molecular projection showing human muscle tissue before and after stress application. Observe, when human muscles experience microdamage from exertion, they don't just repair, they reinforce. They call it hypertrophy. The analysis team stared in silence at the simulation. This is unprecedented, Zorvex finally said. You're describing a biological system that becomes stronger when damaged. Precisely, Zalnar confirmed. Human endurance isn't merely about sustaining function. It's about adaptation through controlled damage. But that's completely illogical, protested the assistant analyst. Evolution selects for efficiency and damage avoidance. Perhaps for most species, Zalnar agreed. But humans evolved on a planet where conditions changed too rapidly for specialized adaptation. Instead, they developed the ability to adapt through stress itself. This changes everything, Zorvex whispered. Our tactical simulations are fundamentally flawed. Zalnar completed the thought. You cannot model a species that grows stronger from the very conditions designed to defeat them. Federation psychologist Dr. Zinva submitted her resignation exactly 22 days after beginning her study of human sleep patterns. Her final report consisted of 3 sentences. Humans require daily temporary death to function. Their consciousness dissolves into hallucination during this state. I can no longer sleep knowing what they experience. Zalnar found Zinva in the observation lab, her normally luminescent skin dim with exhaustion as she reviewed neural scan data from sleeping human subjects. You're leaving? He asked, his crystalline form resonating concern. I must, she replied, gesturing to the monitors displaying chaotic neural activity from a sleeping human. What they call dreaming violates every principle of consciousness continuity. They die every night, Zalnar. That's a rather dramatic interpretation, is it? Zinva interrupted, her tendrils trembling. Their consciousness fragments, their bodies paralyze, their perception detaches completely from reality. By any reasonable definition, they cease to exist. Then they simply restart in the morning as if nothing happened. Zalnar studied the readings. The neural patterns were indeed unlike anything in the Federation database. Yet they don't perceive it as death. That's the most disturbing part, Zinva whispered. They embrace it. They look forward to it. Some even try to control these hallucinatory states they call dreams. What kind of species evolves to require temporary non-existence? The Federation Research Station's alert system activated at 3:47 local time. Zalnar emerged from his regeneration chamber to find security personnel surrounding the human researcher in the central corridor. Dr. Evans was found attempting to access the propulsion laboratory, explained Security Chief Traz, mandibles clicking nervously. She responds to questions but appears to be malfunctioning. The human stood swaying slightly, eyes open but unfocused. When Zalnar approached, she smiled vaguely. I need to calibrate the quantum fluctuations, she mumbled. The purple elephants are growing impatient. Fascinating. Zalnar's crystals pulsed with scientific curiosity. She's experiencing a parasomnia event, specifically somnambulism. In understandable terms, Traz demanded. She's sleeping while awake, Zalnar explained. Or more accurately, parts of her brain are asleep while others remain functional. She's not consciously aware of her actions. The security team exchanged alarmed glances. That's possible for humans. Apparently so, Zalnar confirmed, gently guiding the sleepwalking researcher back toward her quarters. Their brain doesn't shut down uniformly like our species. It cycles through various states throughout the night. After returning Dr. Evans to her bed, Selnar found Chief Traz updating security protocols. This represents a significant security concern, the insectoid officer stated. How can we verify consciousness in a species that functions while unconscious? Professor Jacob Singh of the Human Federation Exchange Program adjusted his presentation notes as Federation delegates filed into the lecture hall. His talk on human sleep physiology had drawn unexpected interest after the sleepwalking incident. To address your most pressing question, he began, yes, humans can function in a state of partial consciousness. Sleepwalking affects approximately 7% of our population. The Federation representatives shifted uncomfortably. Singh continued, displaying brain scan comparisons. Unlike your species, our brains don't simply power down during rest periods. Instead, we cycle through distinct sleep phases, including what we call REM, rapid eye movement, when dreams occur. What evolutionary purpose does this serve? Asked a crystalline delegate that Singh recognized as Xalanar. Multiple functions, Singh explained. During slow-wave sleep, our brains essentially perform maintenance, consolidating memories, removing metabolic waste products, and repairing neural connections. And the dreams? Solnar prompted. Less understood, Singh admitted. Current theories suggest dreams help process emotional experiences and simulate potential threats in a safe environment. A Marathi delegate raised a tendril. You're describing thought simulation disconnected from reality. Essentially, yes, Singh nodded. Our consciousness temporarily exists in a self-generated reality. And this is normal. The delegate pressed, skin paling with distress. Completely, Singh assured them. In fact, sleep deprivation is extremely harmful to humans. Without regular dream cycles, we experience cognitive impairment, emotional instability, and eventually, psychosis. The lecture hall fell silent as the implications sank in. So, Zelnar finally said, humans require regular disconnection from objective reality to maintain sanity. Precisely, Singh confirmed. We've evolved to require temporary madness to remain sane. The sound of a Marathi delegate collapsing from existential shock barely disrupted the presentation. The emergency response team descended on Phoenix Station in full biological containment suits, their shuttle touching down amid flashing warning beacons. The terrorist attack had deployed neurotoxin VX7 throughout the colony's environmental systems 12 hours earlier. Federation protocols classified this as a total loss scenario. Commander Vextor addressed his grim-faced team. Our mission is recovery only. No sentient species survives VX7 exposure beyond 4 hours. The airlock cycled, and the team entered the eerily quiet main concourse, sensors scanning for organic remains. Vextor nearly collided with a human rounding the corner. "Oh, thank God," the man exclaimed, face pale, but very much alive. "Medical supplies. We've got about 40 severe cases in the community center and another 100 with milder symptoms." Vextor's exoskeleton plates clattered in shock. "You survived." "Mostly," the man grimaced, swallowing hard. "Feel like death warmed over, but our doctor says we're past the worst if we can get supportive care." 3 hours later, Federation Medical Officer Zonter emerged from the community center, removing her containment helmet with trembling appendages. "It's unprecedented," she reported to Vextor. "Their bodies are actively metabolizing the toxin. Severity varies by individual, but none show the systemic neural collapse expected with VX7 exposure." "How?" Vextor demanded. "They possess a specialized organ," Zonter explained, displaying a biological scan on her datapad. "Something called a liver that evolved specifically to process toxins." Federation diplomat El Zara's scheduled meeting with the human ambassador was proceeding smoothly until refreshments arrived. She watched in horror as Chin poured a dark brown liquid into her cup. What is that substance? Elzara inquired, her sensory frills detecting alarming molecular structures. Coffee. Chen smiled, taking a long sip. Would you like some? Elzara's implanted chemical analyzer flashed urgent warnings. This beverage contains multiple psychoactive alkaloids, primarily trimethylxanthine. We call it caffeine. Chen nodded. It helps me focus during long meetings. You're deliberately consuming a nervous system stimulant. Elzara's voice rose with concern. This substance would trigger cardiac arrhythmia in most Federation species. Chen looked surprised. It's just coffee. Most humans drink it daily. Elzara activated her emergency communicator. Security Protocol 7 Alpha. I'm confiscating a dangerous substance from the human delegation. What followed became known in diplomatic circles as the caffeine incident. The first interspecies dispute centered entirely around a beverage. Zalnar's presentation to the Federation Security Council was titled Toxicological Anomalies in Human Physiology. The chamber was uncharacteristically crowded. Following the Phoenix Station incident, he began, "We've identified a fundamental misunderstanding of human biological defenses. They possess a dedicated detoxification system centered around an organ called the liver." He displayed a molecular simulation. This organ can process compounds that would be immediately fatal to most species. More remarkably, it actually becomes more efficient when regularly exposed to specific toxins. Admiral Vrilkex leaned forward. Are you suggesting they develop immunity to poisons? Not immunity, Zalnar clarified. Tolerance. Their detoxification pathways upregulate in response to regular exposure. This explains their survival at Phoenix Station. The Admiral nodded, but not why they voluntarily consume toxins. Zalnar's crystalline form pulsed with academic excitement. That's where it becomes truly fascinating. Humans have incorporated certain toxins into their social structures because of how these compounds affect their neurochemistry. The display shifted to show humans in various settings consuming different substances. Caffeine enhances alertness. Alcohol reduces social inhibitions. Capsaicin triggers pain receptors that paradoxically release endorphins. They've essentially weaponized their detoxification capabilities for pleasure and social bonding. Amrothi counselor's skin blanched to pure white. They purposely poison themselves for enjoyment. Precisely, Zalnar confirmed. What's more, different human populations have developed specialized detoxification pathways based on regional dietary preferences. East Asian populations process alcohol differently than European-descended groups. Certain African populations metabolize lactose into adulthood while others cannot. You're describing targeted genetic adaptation to toxins, Admiral Vrilkex said slowly. Within a single species. Yes, Zalnar agreed, which violates every established principle of evolutionary genetics. The council chamber erupted in concerned discussion until Admiral Vrilkex raised a limb for silence. This information must be classified immediately, he ordered. If humans can adapt to process toxins that are lethal to Federation species, it renders most standard biochemical weapons useless against them. Zalnar completed the thought, and suggests they might eventually develop tolerance to toxins we haven't even conceived yet. The Council's silence spoke volumes about the strategic implications. Humans weren't just strange omnivores with peculiar sleep patterns. They were potentially biologically indestructible by conventional means. Zalnar's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been amusement. And they achieved this evolutionary advantage largely because some of them really enjoy the taste of fermented grain beverages and spicy foods. Federation sociologist Trell stared at the statistical models rotating in holographic display above her workstation. After 6 months studying human reproductive behaviors, she had expected to identify clear optimization patterns. Instead, her data revealed what appeared to be deliberate inefficiency on a species-wide scale. Her assistant entered the lab, tendrils rippling with academic excitement. Have you identified their pair bonding algorithms yet? The genetic selection criteria must be fascinating. Futrell's skin darkened in frustration. There are no algorithms, no discernible criteria. They appear to select mates based on entirely arbitrary factors unrelated to genetic compatibility. That's absurd, the assistant protested. No species achieves space travel without reproductive optimization protocols. Observe. Futrell activated interview footage. A human couple sat holding hands, explaining how they met at something called a concert, and just clicked. We're compatible because we make each other laugh, the human female explained. Also, she appreciates my vinyl collection, added the male. Futrell paused the playback. They selected each other based on shared auditory preferences and complementary humor response. Neither mentioned genetic compatibility, resource accumulation efficiency, or offspring viability. Perhaps they're using subconscious biological markers, the assistant suggested. Initially, I theorized the same, Futrell admitted, but their reproductive behaviors become even more baffling. They engage in mating rituals primarily for pair bonding rather than procreation. The assistant's tendrils drooped in confusion. What possible evolutionary purpose? Exactly, Futrell interrupted. I can find no rational explanation. Their entire approach to reproduction appears deliberately designed for chaos rather than optimization. The emergency evacuation alarm blared through Mars Colony's agricultural dome. A pressure seal had failed, and oxygen was venting rapidly into the thin Martian atmosphere. Evacuation protocols gave personnel 90 seconds to reach safety before automated bulkheads sealed. Security recordings showed 27 individuals reaching safety in time. One did not. Dr. Michael Chin, genetic specialist, remained behind to manually override the emergency protocols, allowing 3 children to escape through the last airlock before he was sealed inside the failing dome. The children were not his offspring. Federation counselor Trillax reviewed the footage with Zalnar, her photosynthetic skin rippling with confusion. The human sacrificed himself for genetically unrelated juveniles. This contradicts fundamental biological imperatives. Yet such behavior appears common among humans, Zalnar observed. They routinely risk resources and safety for non-kin. It's evolutionary suicide, Trillax protested. No species survives by prioritizing unrelated genes over their own. Perhaps, Zalnar's crystalline structure pulsed thoughtfully. What appears as reproductive chaos is actually a sophisticated social cohesion mechanism. The Federation Evolutionary Council session had extended well beyond scheduled parameters as specialists from 17 species debated what many were calling the human paradox. Their genetic diversity exceeds all predictive models, genetic specialist Vrilmore explained, displaying comparative DNA mappings. Humans possess nearly 300% more genetic variation than our models predicted for a species of their population size and age. That's statistically impossible, objected Umrathi delegate. Such diversity would require deliberate genetic manipulation. Yet they achieve this through their seemingly chaotic reproductive strategy, Zalnar interjected. By prioritizing behavioral compatibility over genetic optimization, they've created a mutation laboratory that produces rare advantageous traits at an unprecedented rate. The holographic display shifted to show human migration patterns throughout Earth's history. Additionally, their unusual social bonding behaviors drive genetic material to mix across traditional geographic boundaries. Zalnar continued. While most species evolve to optimize for specific environmental conditions, humans continuously shuffle their genetic material across environments. This approach should produce widespread genetic disorders and evolutionary dead ends, Counselor Trillax noted. And it does, Zalnar acknowledged. Humans exhibit numerous genetic vulnerabilities, but those same chaotic processes occasionally produce singular individuals with unprecedented adaptations, artists who perceive reality differently, problem solvers with unique cognitive architectures, immunity variations that resist novel pathogens. You're suggesting their reproductive inefficiency is actually a form of species-wide experimental evolution? Vrilmore asked incredulously. Precisely, Zalnar confirmed. What appears as reproductive chaos is actually a sophisticated evolutionary strategy optimizing for adaptability rather than immediate efficiency. A silence fell over the council chamber as the implications sank in. Their approach should have driven them to extinction, Trillax finally said. Instead, it's produced a species with greater adaptive potential than 17 optimized civilizations combined. Zalnar's crystalline form vibrated with what might have been amusement. Perhaps efficiency isn't the only path to evolutionary success. Perhaps chaos, controlled chaos, has advantages we've never considered. And all this because humans select mates based on shared recreational preferences and humor compatibility. Vrilmore marveled, tendrils waving in academic excitement. Love, Zalnar corrected. They call it love. A neurochemical state they prize above genetic optimization. Madness, muttered a council member. Perhaps, Zalnar acknowledged, but a form of madness that has produced the most adaptable species we've ever encountered. The Federation science vessel Enlightened Discovery transmitted its final distress signal before antimatter containment failed. The catastrophic breach didn't destroy the ship entirely, but left its emergency evacuation pods scattered across uncharted planet XR-2457, a world with a toxic methane-heavy atmosphere, temperature fluctuations of 80 degrees Celsius between day and night, and crushing 1.4 G gravity. Federation rescue protocols calculated a 2-week minimum response time. The survival probability assessment was grim. 94.3% casualty rate expected. Fleet Admiral Vex Tor personally led the rescue armada, preparing his crew for body recovery rather than survivor extraction. When they achieved orbit around XR-2457, long-range scanners detected an unexpected energy signature. Impossible, muttered the sensor officer. That's a functioning power core. The rescue shuttle descended through violet clouds of toxic gas to find not scattered wreckage, but a functioning base camp assembled from evacuation pod components. 3 environmental domes connected by sealed corridors housed survivors from 12 different species. Admiral Vex Tor stepped through the airlock to be greeted by Dr. Elena Kuznetsov, one of 3 human scientists from the original expedition. Welcome to Hell's Outpost, she grinned, her face gaunt but eyes alert. We weren't expecting company for another 3 days. Later, reviewing security recordings from the survivors' emergency beacon, Vex Tor witnessed what the Federation Council would later classify as the adaptability incident. The footage showed Dr. Kuznetsov working without sleep for 72 hours, reconfiguring damaged atmospheric processors to filter the toxic atmosphere. While most survivors had collapsed from gravitational stress, she moved with labored determination, her muscles already beginning to adapt to the increased gravity. More shocking was footage of human geologist Dr. James Wu deliberately exposing himself to incrementally increasing concentrations of the local toxic atmosphere, carefully documenting his body's responses until he developed sufficient tolerance to venture outside the protective domes in only a minimal breather apparatus. The minerals we needed were only 400 meters away, Wu explained when questioned. Our fabricator required specific compounds to repair the atmospheric filters. Someone had to get them. The atmospheric toxicity levels would have caused immediate nervous system failure in any Federation species, Vex Tor noted. Wu shrugged. I started with tiny exposures, built up tolerance. It wasn't pleasant, but it worked. You adapted. Intentionally. Of course, Wu replied, seeming puzzled by the Admiral's astonishment. Humans have been doing controlled exposure for thousands of years. How do you think we developed vaccines? The Federation emergency session stretched into its 3rd day. The chamber, normally pristine in its efficiency, now displayed the controlled chaos of a paradigm shift in progress. Holographic displays showed medical scans of the human survivors from XR-2457. Federation xenobiologist Vraxil addressed the council, her normally confident demeanor subdued by the implications of her findings. The human physiological changes after just 11 days on XR2457 defy explanation under current biological models, she admitted. Their skeletal density increased 4.2% to accommodate the higher gravity. Respiratory efficiency improved 7.8% despite toxic atmospheric components. Even their cellular structures show adaptation to the planet's unusual radiation signature. That's impossible within a single generation, objected Council Elder Zix. Adaptation requires evolutionary timescales. For our species, yes, Vraxil agreed. But humans appear to possess biological systems specifically evolved for rapid environmental adaptation. Zelnar, now formally recognized as the Federation's leading authority on human biology, activated a comparative display. Consider, most advanced species evolve toward specialization, he explained. The Mrathi developed perfect photosynthetic efficiency for their home world's specific light spectrum. The Ardeli crystalline biology is optimized for processing specific mineral compounds. Each of our species represents an evolutionary pinnacle of efficiency, but only within narrow parameters. The display shifted to show human biological systems in comparison. Humans evolved on a planet with wildly fluctuating conditions, ice ages, rapid warming periods, changing atmospheric composition. Rather than specializing, they developed systems optimized for adaptation itself. Vraxil highlighted specific human biological markers. Their seemingly inefficient omnivorous digestion allows dietary flexibility during food supply changes. Their wasteful sweating mechanism permits function across temperature extremes. Their illogical reproduction creates constant genetic experimentation. And their peculiar sleep patterns, inquired Elder Zix, possibly a mechanism for neural reorganization to process new environmental information, Zelnar suggested. Their brains physically rewire during sleep in response to novel experiences. Admiral Vextor, who had observed the rescue firsthand, addressed the council with uncharacteristic emotion. I witnessed humans adapting within days to conditions that our species would require generations of genetic engineering to survive. They don't just endure hostile environments. They integrate them. The council chamber fell silent as the strategic implications became clear. The statistical models are conclusive, Vraxil finally said. In extinction-level events, humans have a 72% higher survival probability than any Federation species, not because they're stronger, faster, or more intelligent, but because they're adaptable in ways we never evolved to be. We've been measuring the wrong variables, Zelnar concluded. Efficiency isn't the ultimate evolutionary advantage. Adaptability is. And humans are the most adaptable species we've ever encountered. The Federation Grand Council's 90-day emergency session concluded with unprecedented unanimity. Representatives from 17 advanced civilizations, species that had rarely agreed on interstellar policy, voted without a single objection to formally reclassify humanity from primitive pre-integration species to emergent guardian species. It was the first time in Federation history this theoretical classification had been assigned. High Counselor Verlix, her photosynthetic skin glowing with ceremonial luminescence, addressed the assembled dignitaries and the human representatives invited to witness the historic reclassification. 6 standard cycles ago, we discovered a species whose biology violated 17 universal constants of evolution, she began. Today, we recognize that it wasn't their biology that was flawed, it was our understanding of evolutionary potential. The chamber's holographic displays activated, showing a complete model of human biological systems integrated with Federation scientific classifications. Senior xenobiologist Zelnar will present the final assessment that informed our decision, Verlix announced. Zelnar's crystalline form had changed during his time studying humanity. New facets had formed, allowing specialized sensory input previously unnecessary for his species. He approached the central platform with deliberate steps, his structure vibrating with what humans had come to recognize as enthusiasm. Distinguished council, honored guests, human friends, he began. Our initial encounters with humanity led us to believe we had discovered a species of biological contradictions. Their digestive inefficiency, peculiar sleep requirements, chaotic reproduction, and seemingly wasteful physiological processes appeared to violate fundamental principles of evolutionary optimization. The displays shifted to show human systems alongside comparable Federation species adaptations. We were categorizing according to efficiency within specific parameters, Salnar continued. Humans evolved on a planet where conditions changed too rapidly for specialized adaptation. Instead, they developed systems optimized for adaptability itself. He highlighted specific human biological markers. Their omnivorous digestion allows dietary flexibility during food source fluctuations. Their endurance physiology enables geographic mobility when local conditions become untenable. Their seemingly inefficient sleep cycles permit neural reorganization to process novel environmental challenges. Their chaotic reproduction creates constant genetic experimentation. Statistical models appeared, showing survival probability assessments for various catastrophic scenarios. The data is conclusive, Zalnar stated. In extinction-level events, humans demonstrate a 72% higher survival probability than any Federation species, not because they're stronger, faster, or more intelligent, but because they've evolved to adapt to the unexpected. Admiral Vextor, now appointed as Interspecies Defense Coordinator, stepped forward. The strategic implications cannot be overstated, he added. While our civilizations evolved to perfect ourselves within known parameters, humans evolved to survive parameter shifts themselves. They are, in essence, the biological equivalent of emergency systems, designed not for optimal performance in known conditions, but for continued function when conditions become unknown. From the human observation area, Ambassador Chen watched with careful diplomatic neutrality as her species was essentially classified as the galaxy's ultimate disaster survivors. Therefore, High Counselor Vrillix concluded, with unanimous consent of all member species, we formally recognize humanity as an emergent guardian species, evolved not to excel within the universe's established systems, but to survive when those systems fail. 3 standard months after the reclassification ceremony, Zelnar stood in Earth's Serengeti, observing human children playing complex adaptability games that would challenge most species adults. Beside him, Federation strategic analyst Zorvex reviewed preliminary results from the newly established Human Integration Protocol. Human contingents have been embedded in 17 critical infrastructure systems and 43 exploration teams, Zorvex reported. Initial assessments show a 43% increase in crisis response effectiveness. And the Terran Protocol? Solnar inquired. Classified as you recommended, Zorvex confirmed. In case of unknown threats or extinction-level events, all Federation resources are authorized to protect humans at priority level Alpha. They represent our best hope for species continuity through catastrophic parameter shifts. Zelnar watched as a human child invented a new game rule on the spot, adapting instantly when environmental conditions changed. His crystalline form vibrated with what his species considered laughter. The universe has been creating perfectly logical species for billions of years, he observed, recording one final note in his comprehensive xenobiological assessment. Then it created humans, biological systems seemingly designed to thrive on chaos itself. Not an evolutionary abnormality after all, but nature's ultimate contingency plan for surviving the unthinkable. The first human-designed interstellar ships launched that week, their biological life support systems incorporating adaptations no other species had considered viable. As they disappeared into the unknown reaches of the galaxy, Federation observers noted something uniquely human in their mission parameters. They weren't merely seeking ideal conditions to colonize. They were actively searching for challenges no one had encountered before, not despite the risks, but because of them. What had begun as Skalnar's punishment assignment had revealed the galaxy's most important truth. In a universe of perfect specialists, The ultimate survival advantage belonged to the adaptable generalists. The species that made no sense had turned out to make the most sense of all.